Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show, episode number 68. And this week we'll be going over my meta predictions for Worlds. Now Worlds is another name for BlizzCon, and that will be going on 4 weeks from now, from what I know. Should be starting on the 7th of November on the Friday. But anyway, I'm going to be going over all the major classes and archetypes that have been showing up in regionals. Which is where a lot of people are qualifying for. I'll bring up the list of players as well and just sort of go over those quickly. Besides that, I will also be doing, the next couple of weeklies will be in-depth deck techs for whatever decks you guys want. So I'll be going over the decks which have been doing well in regionals now, and then you can take any of those decks, put it in the comment section, ask for whatever decks you want to, and then I will do the next 2 weeklies definitely, maybe the third one, possibly not, of any of the particular decks that you really want me to go over, as in a full deck tech. I haven't done one of them in a while. Things like core cards and different tech cards you can run, what kind of stances you can have on particular archetypes, things like that. So if you're interested in those kinds of shows, then just put down a comment below about the particular deck you would like me to go over. But anyway, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Now, I'm actually just going to be reading this off Hearthstone because I would bring it up, but there is a lot, and it would just look like a mess. So what I'm going to do at first is, I've got the little Road to BlizzCon thing up here, and I think it's 16? Yeah, the 16 players who are going are from NA. There's Firebat, Strifecrow, D2, and Tari. I've never heard of Tari. That's a new one to me. I know the rest of them fairly well, Strifecrow being probably the favorite out of those 4 just because of his previous sort of performances. Then from Europe, we've got Kalento, Green Sheep, Number Guy, and Kaor. Again, one person I've never heard of, but the other 3 are really well known. From China, Run and Gun, Lu Xi... Why do I have to get the Chinese names? Lu Xiaowu? I'm going to get butchered for that. Someone's going to be really pissed off at me for this one. Anyway, Tiddler, Celestial, and Querio? Anyway, I've heard of Run and Gun before. But the Eastern scene are fairly unknown, I'd say, to a lot of people, because they don't tend to do the whole streaming thing, and they don't tend to do a lot of social media stuff. So the only people who really know who they are the ones that compete in tournaments against them. And then from Korea, there's Kranich and Reniauer. I've heard of Reniauer. That's actually a fair point. And then from Taiwan, we have Tom and Frozen Ice. So, as I said, from Easton, I have no idea. I've heard of 2 of those players, but I'm guessing they're all very good. I should hope that everyone who is going is absolute top tier, because they've gone through so many qualifiers and they've got there. So either they are literally the luckiest person ever in the history of Hearthstone, or they are top tier players, and I would assume that is the second one because that's the one that makes most sense. Now, out of the 2 regions I know a lot about, Europe, I'd say the favorite coming out of Europe is probably Kalento. Although Green Sheep and Number Guy are very well known, and from NA, it's probably Strifecrow is the favorite, but then Firebat and D2 are also very well known. And there's also all the people I don't know that much about. Obviously, are very good players. I just don't know enough about them to make a judgment call about who's favorite. So I would say the 2 favorites going into this are probably Kalento and Strifecrow, but we'll have to see. Those 2 are the best known for deck building and playing in general, especially Kalento. He's come up with, I want to say, half the metagame at the moment. He keeps making new decks. So anyway, we just had all 64, all of them, decks from the top 16 of NA regionals. I don't think we got these for the other ones, but we got all 64 deck lists for NA regionals. And the format, for anyone who doesn't know, is best of 5, I do believe? Yeah, best of 5, 4 decks, ban 1. I think that's the best format for an invitational type thing in general. best of 5, so it's actually a longer series and is a lot more defined by skill. And then ban format is actually a pretty big deal, I would say. It helps get rid of the super imbalances. Like in tournaments, for example, whenever a deck is super broken, it actually doesn't affect it as much because you just ban it, which is a good thing. So I'm happy that ban is being included here, because I'm not sure whether there's any overpowered deck, but the point is that in a more balanced format, it gives you strategic options, and in a format which has a deck that's too good, you just get rid of that, and then you get the strategic options again by just removing the overpowered thing. So I think ban format is definitely where you want to be going right now. It's also the format I use for Versus Series, interestingly enough. I recently switched that. Anyway, so the field was incredibly diverse. All 9 classes showed up. Now, the most popular was actually Warlock. 14 of 16 people were using that. That's at 88% show up. Then, past that, Shaman and Hunter were at 56%. So this is the percentage of people that were using it in top 16. Then we got Rogue and Priest at 50. And then 3 classes at 13. Mage and Warrior, I expected at 13%, just 2 people running it. Paladin, I did not expect to be that low. I think Paladin was a deck that a lot of people have been trying to hype up, but it's died off incredibly fast. It took about a week and a half for that deck to die off. That's really surprising. I'm not quite sure why. I'm guessing it just kind of... Paladin was always a good jack of all trades. One, I guess it can be outsped by... I mean, the Hunter decks can go 2 ways. They can just rip control decks apart if they really tech for it. So I guess they lost their edge against some aggro decks, and then therefore the control decks that are the same speed as them probably have better options, and the aggro decks, the newer ones, are good at beating control decks. So I'm guessing that's probably what happened to Paladin. I still think it's a solid class, so it's just interesting that it dropped by that much. Because I was expecting at least a 40% thing for Paladin. But I'm just gonna look at the 2 guys who did play it. Were Dear Jason, who is playing a Paladin deck that I have just no idea what I'm looking at, quite frankly. It was a Paladin list, and then running things like Mad Bomber. And no, I'm not joking. Things like Mad Bomber and one Senjin, a Spellbreaker, Harrison Jones for some reason. I guess that's to hit the 1-off Eagle Horn Bow. That's kind of weird. I don't know. There's some weird things with Paladin at the moment. Admirable was playing a more standard list, but Paladin was a bit of a shock for me. I was expecting it to be a lot more prevalent than it was. So I'll put it that way. Anyway, so besides the Paladin thing though, the other 2 classes that weren't played that much were Mage. It was just some Freeze Mage, because you can't really run Aggro Mage, the other classes do it better. Freeze Mage is an interesting one. It provides a couple of weird things here or there. I don't think it's a top tier deck though. And Control Warrior, kind of in the same boat as Paladin, where there's a lot of life gain, but it has this whole thing where it can, like, the slower decks tend to beat it, because they only have a limited amount of win conditions. So I'm not sure about Control Warrior. I think Paladin and Warrior are in the same boat right now. Whereas the control deck that has been seeing a lot of play actually was Priest. Half of the field was playing Priest, and a lot of these label under control. I'm not taking the labels as like definitive as to what they mean, because the Hunter ones are a bit sketchy in terms of which one is aggro and which one's mid-range. But I think I'll just open a couple of the Priest ones and have a look at them. So we've got people like Tides of Time was playing a control deck. And this is the kind of thing where Priest have always been in a weird position. Tides of Time was playing a 1-off Silence, 1-off Holy Smite, was playing Injured Blade Masters with Circle, as well as the Orkanite Soul Priests. 1 Shadow Madness. I do like Shadow Madness right now. I think it's a fairly decent card. The interesting thing is he's playing 1 Shadow Madness, 1 Cabal, instead of 2 Cabals, which is very interesting. The other thing that was interesting is only 1 Holy Fire. As for some of the others, it appears that 1 Cabal has been showing up pretty much everywhere. Almost everyone is running 1 Cabal out of the control ones. Hyped was running 2, and the Shadow Madness, so he went full in on the anti-Zoo hate. But besides that, the control decks weren't running 2 Cabal that much, the mid-range decks were. And I think that's perfectly fine, because the mid-range decks, you do want to run those sort of massive tempo swings. Play Cabal, steal something, swing. Whereas control decks have other ways of gaining tempo. You don't always need Cabal Shadow Priest. I still think the card is really, really good, but in certain situations you don't need it if you're running the more controlling side of things. So Priest were definitely split down the middle there. Warlock was the most popular class by far, about 20% increase. Only 2 people weren't running Warlock. It appears that Warlock is the class to beat right now. There were 2 different decks that showed up. There was a few handlock, and by a few I mean 5, I think. Yeah, I think there were 5 handlocks, and the rest was Zoo, so 9 Zoos. Now, the Zoo decks in general were doing what Zoo normally does, which is everyone disagrees on the exact list because it's impossible to come up with an optimized Zoo list. No, really, it's impossible to come up with an optimized Zoo list. Everyone disagrees with each other. Chaki went the weirdest route of Zoo deck I've seen in a while. He was running double Echoing Ooze. He has released the Ooze on the metagame. So yeah, the double Echoing Ooze was appearing there in Chaki's Zoo deck, along with 1 R&B Cow. Double Power Overwhelming. There's a couple interesting things there. Ant was playing a more standardized version. But we had some other people like Death Star was also running it. Death Star ran a one of Void Terror even. As I said, there's a lot of weird ones where you can't really decide which one is correct. So a lot of people just don't really... A lot of people don't really think of Zoo as being like, what's the optimized list? Because I don't think anyone has one. It's so much to do with personal preference that you just give up when it comes to trying to find an optimal list. Now, D2, who actually did qualify, was running Handlock as his Warlock deck, and this was an interesting one. He ran 1 Faceless, 1 Big Game Hunter, mostly for the mirror, but besides that, fairly standard, just solid in terms of late game and in terms of the early game, having those 4 threats you can put down, and in late game he had Ragnaros, Jaraxxus, and the Moltens. So fairly standard handlock list from him. 1 Power Overwhelming was interesting though. Mostly for Shadow Flame interaction, I should imagine. The other notable player who was playing handlock was That's Admirable, who was also running a very similar list. 1 Power Overwhelming, no BGH, but still the Faceless. Only 1 Siphon Soul. The only difference was he was running 2 Hellfires, 1 Shadow Flame, as opposed to 2 Shadow Flames, 1 Hellfire, which has become more standardized as of late. So that was it for the Warlocks. Now, as far as Rogue goes, Rogue was entirely Miracle. And when I say Miracle, I mean Gadget's Android Miracle. I don't mean the Leroy Miracle, because it kind of exists, not really. I guess I'll start with the person I just finished with, which was Admirable. Admirable was playing one of the single weirdest Miracle lists I think I've ever seen. Double Shadow Step, double Sinister Strike, a Perdition's Blade, 1 of Novice Engineer, 1 of Arcane Golem, 2 Cold Light Oracles, Blood Mage. He basically won with all spells and a 1 of Arcane Golem instead of Leroy. That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. He ran the most combo-focused Miracle Rogue deck I think I've ever seen, including the ones that ran Leroy before he was nerfed. That is definitely one of the most combo-focused Rogue decks I think I've ever seen. But a couple of people ran it, like Tyrese was playing the Leroy Jenkins variant with double Shadow Step. Of course, you can't really use both Shadow Steps in 1 turn. I guess you could with the coin. I think that's 11 mana. 5. Yeah, that's 11. Alright, besides that though, he was playing some interesting cards, like Harrison Jones to deal with Hunter Weapons and Doom Hammers, and then there was a Alex Straza. Edwin's still hanging out in there, but the Alex Straza was the main crazy one. I think Alex Straza just, it feels like his particular version of Miracle was running a bit more like Freeze Mage does, control the board, Alex Straza combo. That kind of feels like the angle he had on it. Stunner was playing a kind of weird hybrid of the mid-rangey ones and the combo ones. He was running 1 Cold Light, 1 Arcane Golem, a random Azure Drake, but not that many threats. Still very combo focused, but nowhere near as focused as Admirable. And then you had Kuhaku. Kuhaku. I can't do names. Anyway, he was running the complete opposite, where a lot of people were running the full combo focused. He was running mid-range Miracle. What do I mean by that? So here are your win conditions. Shade of Naxxramas is a one-off. Violet Teacher is a one-off because you can swing in for 7 with a Violet Teacher fairly easily using Miracle. 7 plus. 1 Lotheb, a standard, a Sludge Belcher to help against aggro, and a Cairn. So this was running the sort of high reach with Eviscerates and also Cold Bloods and a diverse amount of threats. Also the Edwin hanging out. So he was running the no damage combo version of Miracle. Just the Shade as his sort of damage combo thing, mostly with Cold Bloods. So anyway, a couple other classes. Druid was mostly ramp, from what I can tell. No, there were a lot of combo decks. A lot of combo decks, actually. And by combo, it's not combo go crazy, it's combo in terms of the Force of Nature combo. So Jabbed was playing combo, apparently. I think pretty much all of them are Wild Growth decks. Yes. Okay, so everyone was playing Wild Growth. The major difference, that's why I was like, hey, I remember all of these being ramp. Yes, they were. Just some of them are running fun combo, some of them aren't. So the ones that aren't running fun combo are running things like Sunwalkers, and this one, Ant, was running, I think this is like a Silver Bullet one. One that's designed to be a handlock. Double Naturalize. Double Naturalize. I've never seen more than one Naturalize in a deck before. That is incredible. That's crazy. Also the Harrison Jones train. I think Harrison Jones was sort of the card which a lot of people ran. And maybe that's because there was a lot more Shaman than I think some people expected. So they were running Harrison Jones like a Silver Bullet for a Shaman. But Double Naturalize is just crazy. I did not expect that at all. I think he was probably running the most unique one. Let's see what Druid deck Strife Crow was running, because this is the one that he did get top 4 with. Strife Crow was running a ramp deck with 1 combo. No, double Roar, 1 Force of Nature. Interesting. Besides that, he was running Spectral Knights, Shade of Naxxramas, Sun Fury Protectors. Interesting combination there. And Cenarius is the late game, along with things like Cairn. So he was running sort of a weird Vybrids ramp combo list type thing. It was like, it kind of reminds me of the old setup for tokens, but without the tokens. Very interesting list. I don't think I would have settled on a list like this. Chillwind Yeti showing up as a 2-up as well instead of Ascension. Very interesting. Although I guess if you're running Sun Fury Protector, there's 2 extra sets of taunts. So you don't need to worry as much about having independent taunts. You can just run the things with higher life. No Sludge Belchers. You heard me right. No Sludge Belchers in a ramp deck. That is interesting. Very interesting deck to come out of Strife Go. He's usually sort of the everyone follow this guy in terms of druids type person. But he was running a completely unique druid list. Very interesting. Now, I think the only one I haven't had a look at is Shaman. So we'll just go over that one and then we'll close out. I think. See, we looked at Miracle Rogue, Druid, Warlock, Hunter. No, we haven't looked at Hunter yet. So yeah, we'll do Shaman and then we'll do Hunter and then I'll close out. Now, there were 2 types of Shamans in terms of labeling. Again, it's difficult to figure out exactly how the labeling works. But there were 2 types. There was the mid-rangey ones and then there was the burst Shamans. Now, I did see a double Doomhammer deck. See if I can just find it quickly. Yeah, there was actually a double Doomhammer. There was a double Doomhammer Shaman. Was it Chaki? It's called Doomhammer Shaman. So, yep, it was in fact Chaki. Chaki was playing 2 Doomhammers, 2 Lava Bursts, and the Rock Biters. This is one of the most aggressive in terms of burst Shaman decks I've ever seen. It was also running a 1-up Undertaker to supplement the aggro. That definitely is one of the single burstiest Shaman decks I think I've seen in a long time. And to be honest, I think if anyone was going to be running it, it would be Chaki. He's a person who does like his aggro decks a lot. He runs a lot of aggro, he ran a lot of Hunter aggro in the past. Ant was running a one-off Manatide. He was running a mid-rangey variant. Wasn't actually running a lot of burst. No lava bursts in the list. One of Doomhammer, one of Valkyrie. This kind of reminds me of the older school ones, where he's running sort of 2-for-1s, very little card draw, just the Manatide Totem, running 2-for-1s, and just try and you 2-for-1 when you can with AoEs, and then you just 1-for-1 his major threats, and use Alakir and Doomhammer along with Rockbiters to close out the game before the lack of cards actually comes back to bite you. One of Manatide, if you stick a Manatide at the right time, it can actually draw a lot of cards, so it's interesting to see the one-off. There's also a one-off Gnomish Inventor, kind of like Manatide, but less of an investment. Besides that, we've got the burst ones, which have been labeled down. Now, from what I can understand, the burst ones were running Lava Burst. From what I can understand, they were running Lava Burst as kind of a way of just closing out the game quickly. We actually have Dear Jason was running a Kel'Thuzad. I think Kel'Thuzad is probably the best 8-drop you can run in Shaman. But I mean, Alakir is kind of an 8-drop. He's more of a combo piece. But I mean, in terms of 8-drops, you actually just play to stick to the board. I would definitely run Kel'Thuzad over Ragnaros, or like Alexstrasza or Ysera or anything. I think he's simply the best because you have all the totems and you have the wolves and things like that, and they just all come back over and over and over again. D2 was actually running a aggro Shaman. That's crazy. Undertakers, Zombie Chow, mostly to buff and get board position, Haunted Creeper, Loot Hoarder, Harvest Golem, that's a lot of death rattles. One Defender of Argus. Basically, the deck he ran was designed to get massive amounts of board control early, and then close out the game with possible Doomhammer Rockbiter, or maybe some Cairn, like maybe put down a Cairn and just they can't deal with it, or Fire Elementals, even a one of Manatide in here, only Singular Lightning Storm as well. Interesting list. Now, the last one I want to talk about, this is actually a deck which I think I probably know the most about of all these because I'm playing it at the moment, which is Hunters. Now, the two types of Hunters that showed up were the super mid-rangey ones, which were running really weird cards. There was a Captain Greenskin that showed up at some point. Basically, the ones that were running slightly more control-y, as opposed to just these sort of 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, 6-drop. That's literally how it works. You just curve to 4 and then play 5-drops and 6-drops that kill control decks or help defeat aggro decks. So some of them were running a lot more control-y. There were some wild pyromancers showing up, some explosive traps with the bow. But the main and predominant one that did show up was the Death Rattle Hunter, which can also just be called like, I guess it's an aggro deck with some mid-game. So I'm not exactly sure what you call that. I think Death Rattle is probably the best name for it. But you had people like Chaki picking it up, which, again, he played Aggro Hunter in the past, so not exactly surprising. But a lot of these are playing 2-off Snake Trap. From what I can understand, Snake Trap is absolutely ridiculous at the moment, and I think Snake Trap was going to have its heyday at some point, and it's a very, very good trap at the moment. I'd say it's probably at its best that it's ever been. Pretty good. 3/1/1 Snakes is actually a lot at the moment, just it's 2 mana, 3 guys, and it hits really hard. Helps generate a lot of advantage considering there isn't any Unleash in the format anymore. And besides that, Double Bow in his version is interesting, although I don't think there are any freezings in here. Interesting. So Jackie was running no freezings, only 2 traps to support 2 bows. Generally the ratio I like to go by is 2-to-1, so I would run 1 bow in this list. But there's a couple other interesting things in here, like Timberwolf, which I guess only gets real value out of the Snake Trap, but it's still a beast you can throw down with a Houndmaster. 1 Unleash the Hounds as well. Very interesting list. Now, the late game for this deck is Sludge Belcher as opposed to any anti-control ones, along with High Main. So the Sludge Belcher helps a lot against aggro decks, so does Snake Trap. And besides that, we do have the entire Death Rattle core. Now, the Death Rattle core, for anyone who doesn't know, is Mad Scientist, Loot Hoarder, Haunted Creeper, Leper Gnome, Web Spinner, Undertaker. Hunter basically can get away with every death rattle that is playable, and it means that their Undertakers always trigger more or less. You can actually get 3-4 Undertakers on turn 2. I have done it. It's not that uncommon. It will almost always be a 2-3 attacking on turn 2. Almost always. And if you have the coin and you go Undertaker, either Web Spinner or Leopardome, and then a 2-drop, you just have a 3-4 attacking on turn 2, which is ridiculous. So that's the main strength of the deck. This one from Chucky was interesting though, running the one Unleash and the Timberhound. Now, Death Star was running again double Snake Trap. I think Snake Trap is at its best right now. There was a Freezing in here as well. I think Freezing is also quite good against some of the control decks. And besides that, double Knife Juggler. Some people have been running Knife Juggler, some people haven't. It's a case of, unlike the rest of the cards in the deck, it's easy to remove, which is the problem. However, it also has an extreme amount of efficiency if they can't kill it. So it's kind of a give or take, what do you play? The interesting thing about Death Star's list is no Loatheb. Now, while I do think Loatheb is at its weakest at the moment, I still think it is at the top of the curve for cards, at least in Hunter. In Hunter and in Zoo, I don't know if it's good enough to play, not because it's not good enough, but because it's a 5-drop and you have Doomguard in that slot. But in Hunter, I think it's worth playing. I think Loatheb against a lot of classes right now is at its weakest, although I still think Loatheb is one of the top 5 cards in the game. So it's often just worth playing all the time, no matter what the metagame is. So interesting to cut that. Knife Juggler, I think, is the big switch here. Firebat was playing another version with Ironbeak Owl, Direwolf Alpha, 1 Freezing, 2 Snake Trap. I think 1 Freezing, 2 Snake Trap is a pretty good setup if you're running double bow right now. And then Jab was actually not running any Snake Traps. He was running double Explosive 1 Freezing. That is an interesting one. Now, Flare is showing up in all of these, mostly to deal with the mirror match, and also cycles, makes your deck smaller, and people are okay with this. Now, this one was running Black Knight. Black Knight is really good against Sludge Belcher, but not much else at the moment, which is kind of a thing where it's like, is it worth it running just for Sludge Belcher? I think the answer is yes, because a lot of these don't run Hunter's Marks. This one is, but a lot of them don't. So that's an extra perspective you can put on this. This one did have double Unleash, 1 Houndmaster. This is the most anti-aggro one I've seen in a while. Double Explosive, double Unleash, no Sludge Belchers though. So instead of going for the creature way of beating the aggro decks, you went for the spells, go for the clears, then make your mid-game just kill your opponent. Now, the last thing I want to comment on as far as Jab's list is actually the lack of Savannah High Mains. That is something which I'm not entirely convinced about. I think Savannah High Main is one of the main reasons to play Hunter right now, besides all the crazy death rattles. And it is a very good card. It does just close out games, so it's a bit risky to leave it out. However, if you are bringing this in just to beat sort of Zoo decks because you have double Unleash and no one plays around Unleash anymore, or I think that's the main thing about Hunter in general, actually. You can tech it for anti-aggro or anti-control, and you can bring it in tournaments as a silver bullet for either. So I think that's the main thing about Hunters to keep in mind right now, and that's why I think it's probably one of the better decks to have a look at. I would say that over half of the people will be playing it in general, because it's a very, very good filler for like your last deck slot. You're looking for a silver bullet, bring in Hunter, you can tech it to whatever your other 3 decks are weakest against, and then just go from there. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. Remember, if you want me to go over any of these particular lists, particularly from regionals, then put it in the comment section below and I'll do those next week. But as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.